Good morning.
Good morning.
Since you all just passed the choir auditions, I expect to see everyone in choir Wednesday evening. We'll get you one way or another. Make a good choir. So, we're finally here. Year 2020. How many enjoy it so far? I had a great vacation between Christmas and New Year's. I was waiting on hand and foot, told what to do, where to be, and how to do it. Couldn't have been better, but I won't schedule it for next year. The balls have dropped. Calendars have been turned over. Hopefully you all turned over a count. In fact, I hope you put up a new calendar. They're all new responsibilities for the year 2020. The worst thing about January 1st, not that it marks the official end of the holiday season, not that it means school starts again this week for the students, not even that it signals we all just got a year older. The worst thing about January 1st is we're immediately inundated with two of the most depressing messages imaginable. Can you guess what they are? First, we're barraged and berated online, on TV, on buses with the fact that it's high time to lose weight from all those Christmas goodies. Second, we begin to get reminded that it's time to do our taxes. Yay! Don't that just make you happy for the new year? And as if January weren't dark enough on its own, it's that our consumer culture doesn't have anything else to hawk in these maxed out credit card winter days except sleek new diet plans and snazzy new tax prep programs that you see on TV. So Happy New Year to everybody. Every new beginning deserves to be heralded with good news, not more work. You know, we don't celebrate an engagement announcement by bemoaning the price of wedding cakes. We don't rejoice at the news of a new child by adding up the lost hours of sleep we're going to be having. We don't embrace a new career with the thought that it'll take over every moment of our lives. And we don't buy a new house with a hefty mortgage and iffy plumbing and drafty attic. We buy a new home to love and live in, right? At least supposedly. So before we get bogged down with the hopes and fears of a brand new year, let's take a look for a moment at, on our way to the table, how to ponder the meaning of this wise men, their visitation. And to begin, let's step back a little bit and look at the territory, especially right now. The land was divided into 4 political districts and several lesser territories. Judea was to the south, Samaria was in the middle, Galilee to the north, and Idumea to the southeast. And Bethlehem of Judea, also called Judah, had been prophesied as the Messiah's birthplace. Jerusalem was also in Judea and was a seat of the government for Herod the Great, king of all 4 districts. And although he was a ruthless, evil man who murdered many of his own family, Herod the Great supervised the renovation of the temple, making it larger and more beautiful. And this made him very popular with many Jews. Jesus would visit Jerusalem many times because the great Jewish festivals were held here. The tradition says the Magi were men of high position from Parthia, near the site of an ancient Babylon after exile, and knew of the Old Testament predictions of the Messiah's coming. Maybe even Eastern astrologers who studied ancient manuscripts from around the world. And because of their Jewish exile centuries earlier, they would have had copies of the Old Testament in their hand. They may have even had a special message from God directing them to the Messiah. Some scholars say that these magi were each from a different land, representing the entire world bowing before Jesus. Here, men from faraway lands recognized Jesus as the Messiah when most of God's chosen people in Israel didn't. So we got Matthew's pictures Jesus as king over the whole world, not just Judea. So, these wise men traveled thousands of miles to see the King of the Jews. When they finally found him, they responded with joy and worship and gifts. This is so different from the approach people often take today. We expect God to come looking for us, to explain himself to us, to prove who he is, and to give us gifts. Those who are wise still seek and worship Christ today, not for what they can get, but for who he is. The Magi saw Jesus' star. Balaam referred to a coming star out of Jacob in Numbers 24:17. And some say the star may have been in conjunction with Jupiter and Saturn and Mars in 6 BC, and others have no explanation whatsoever. But couldn't God, who created the heavens, have created a special star to signal the birth of his own son? Whatever the nature of the star, these magi traveled thousands of miles searching for a king, and they found him. When these magi found the Christ, the light of the world, they bowed down and presented him with gifts. The magi gave him expensive gifts because they were worthy presents for a future king. Bible students have seen these gifts, symbols of Christ's identity and what he would accomplish. We all know the routine. Gold, a gift for a king. Incense, frankincense, a gift for a deity. And myrrh, a spice for a person who was going to die, used for embalming. These gifts may have provided the financial resources for the trip to Egypt and back. The Magi brought gifts and worshiped Jesus for who he was. This is the essence of true worship, honoring Christ for who he is and being willing to give him what is valuable to you. We worship God because he's perfect, just, and the almighty creator of the universe, worthy of the best we all have to give. What's most striking here is the contrast between pagan stargazers and King Herod. The outsiders are more in tune with what God is doing through Jesus than the Jewish insiders who are supposed to be looking for his coming. From the beginning, Jesus is worshipped by those we least expect, rejected by his very own. God outwits Herod by directly intervening to save this special child and his family. Worship of God is a crucial and critical dimension in both testaments. One might argue that it's the very goal for which Israel and the church were formed. The living God is the sole object of worship. He delights in satisfying the joy and getting satisfaction and joy from that his children find in him. The true nature of worship is not about servant entertainment or passive observation. It's an active acknowledgement of God's worth in a variety of humble ways. British pastor Jeff Thomas tells an interesting and amusing event that occurred sometime back at Bryan College in Dayton, Tennessee. He's a gifted preacher. Al Martin was preaching in the main auditorium of the college for a special conference. The congregation was completely absorbed by what they were hearing. In fact, towards the middle of the sermon, all the lights went out. Now that's not too unusual. All kinds of things happen. We've had lights go out here and come back on. The power failures. But you might be interested in what actually caused the interruption. It can only happen with something very high tech. Have you ever gone, especially in bathrooms, this has to happen. You go to the bathroom, you don't move. What happens after a little while? The lights go out. You go, hey, wait a minute. Now you got to move your hands around, wait, the lights come back on. Well, that's what happened. It seems the trigger mechanism, the kind of sensor, had been connected to the main light switch in the auditorium. The purpose of the mechanism was to conserve energy. The sensor caused the lights and the room to automatically be extinguished when no one was detected as being moving in the room. In other words, if there's no movement, after a certain period of time, say a quarter of an hour, the lights go out. The engineers had calculated that it wouldn't be possible for people to sit motionless for less than that period of time. And the instruments were calibrated accordingly for a quarter of an hour. So here was a congregation, hushed, attentive, totally gripped by the message being delivered by a gifted communicator, when suddenly, because they were so still, they were plunged into total darkness. Pastor Martin ignored the fact that the lights had gone out and kept right on preaching his remaining sermon in a dark room. And when he finished his sermon, he said, "Let's pray." And at this instruction, many of the congregation shifted in their seats, leaned forward, bowed their heads, lights come back on. It's a funny world, this high-tech world of ours today. I thought of an interesting little story that has some meaning for us for Epiphany. When the light came into the world, it took over the darkness. Tomorrow is the day we celebrate the coming of the Magi, to worship the Christ child. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow described the event in his poem, The Three Kings, which includes these lines. "For we in the east have seen his star, and have ridden fast, and have ridden far, to find and worship the King of the Jews. And the people answered, You ask in vain, we know of no king but Herod the Great. They thought the wise men were men insane, as they spurred their horses across the plain, like riders in haste who cannot wait. And when they came to Jerusalem, Herod the Great, who had heard this thing, sent for the wise men and questioned them. And he said, Go down into Bethlehem and bring me tidings of this new king. So they rode away, and the star stood still, the only one in the gray of morn. Yet it stopped, it stood still, of its own free will, right over Bethlehem on the hill, the city of David where Christ was born. And the three kings rode through the gate and the guard, through the silent street, till their horses turned and neighed as they entered the great inn yard. But the windows were closed and the doors were barred, only a light in the stable burned. The Magi followed a star to where the Christ child lay. That star, besides guiding the Magi to the house where the Christ child lay, is symbolic of the coming of light, the light of Christ into the world. The world was sitting in total darkness. Just the congregation at Bryan College was sitting in darkness, until the congregation bowed to pray, the lights came back on. Christ truly is the light of the world. That's the most important truth we can affirm this day. Without his presence, the world indeed is in darkness. There's no story of a young man dying on the battlefield who asked for a chaplain. He said to that chaplain, Give me a light, chaplain. The chaplain finds a cigarette and starts to put it between his lips. The young man whispers, No, chaplain. The other kind of light. The chaplain reaches into his pocket and brings out a New Testament, begins to read John 8:12. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, will have the light of life. That's it. That's it, whispers the soldier as he lapses into unconsciousness and death. That was the light he needed. It's a light all of us need today, especially today after what's happened this past weekend. Einstein argued that the speed of light, there is an eternal now. He postulated that time and space are relative to the speed of light. Light is the constant. We modern people think he thought this thing up. In fact, Peter Hike in his book, Eternity Now, says, Yet 2,000 years earlier, he wrote, John wrote, God is light. And he recorded Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. John taught that Jesus is the Word, and the Word is the light. All things are made through him and are relative to him. Think how important light is. Without light, life on earth would be impossible. Think about it. In the same way, light is the appropriate symbol of the world with Christ. He's our guide, he's our strength, the one who fills our life with meaning. Professor Harold DeWolf, in his book, The Religious Revolt Against Reason, tells of an experience he had with a young man. He went swimming at midnight one night with a friend in the Atlantic Ocean at Massachusetts Bay. He said the water was full of phosphorescent light. Every dip of the hand into the water produced something like a circle of flashing gems. And every breaker looked like a cascade of fireworks. To ride the waves, they went out some distance from the shore. And then turning back towards land, the wolf was gripped by a strange fear, because the lights from the shore were no longer visible. He looked up at the sky to get his bearings, but the sky was like the water, full of spectacular confusion of the northern lights. And there was no star visible. And he panic overtook him. And for all that glittering display, there was no fixed reality. He couldn't tell which way to shore. It started back with a helpless terror engulfing him. Have you ever been out somewhere at night and no mark as to which way to go? It can be quite terrorizing. He learned that with no fixed star to guide him, it was almost impossible to chart out his course for return. Thank God we have a star to follow. It's the same star that guided the wise men long ago. It's the light of Christ. Christ who is dependable as a guide, whose love never fails. If you look at a dictionary, writes Pastor Scott Coltrane, the first definition for light is something that makes vision possible. In other words, light makes it possible for us to see. Without light, we're hopelessly blind to our surroundings, blind to our situations and circumstances, blind to even ourselves. Light makes it possible for us to see clearly things that we really need to see. Have you ever thought about the fact that with the absence of light, absence of sunlight, it can cause blindness? Think about that. With the absence of sunlight, it can be blindness. Animals who live out their lives in complete absence of light are usually blind. Mules kept in the mines also become blind. Horses kept in dark stables, denied sunlight, become blind. Those who live in dungeons or cellars, prisons, mines, and similar places that are denied sunlight lose their sight. But not everyone wants to live in the light. Some people don't want their lives to be transparent. To those willing to open their lives to the Christ light, there is healing and wholesomeness and life abundant. Before Jesus, Coltrane writes, most of the world was spiritually blind, but Christ made it possible for us to have a glimpse of God in his glory. In many of his books, Philip Yancey tells the story of Commander Richard Byrd. Byrd once spent 6 months in a metal hut at the South Pole. The sun made no appearance during 4 of the 6 months he was there. Talk about darkness. Here's how Commander Byrd described that experience in a journal. He says, I find that I crave light as a thirsty man craves water. A funeral gloom hangs in a twilight sky. There is this period between life and death, Byrd wrote. This is the way the world will look to the last man when it dies. 3 weeks before the sun was due to shine again, Byrd wrote in his journal, I tried to imagine what it would be like, but the conception was too vast for me to grasp. And when the light finally did make its appearance, Byrd found it to be overwhelming. When the Magi found Christ's child, they were overwhelmed and they bowed and worshiped and presented him gifts. Should we find ourselves in the presence of Christ, we find ourselves overwhelmed as well. Overwhelmed with his holiness, overwhelmed with the light of his love. Most of you remember the story about Bart Millard and Mercy Me, the group he was in. He put it very well in his song, I Can Only Imagine. With these words, it says, surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus, or in awe of you be still? Will I stand in your presence, or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Of course, we cannot imagine. But we know when we have that final grand epiphany of the glory of Christ, it'll be far beyond anything we have ever experienced before. The end of our text, it says, after finding Jesus and worshiping, the Magi were warned by God not to return through Jerusalem, as they had previously intended. Instead, they returned to their countries by another route. Friends, finding Jesus may mean that your life must take a different direction. One that is responsive and obedient to God's word. May the light of Christ so shine in our hearts that our lives may glow with the light of his love.